Spiral from the Book of Saw is the 9th film in the Saw franchise and the second attempt to breathe new life into the series after the quote-unquote final chapter came out, which in other words is when they gave up making this yearly series because Paranormal Activity made more money. Now, I'm not going to pretend that these movies are good because they're not. I mean, Saw 1 is the only competent movie in the series, so I give it credit for that, and Saw 2 was the worst Saw film before Spiral came out, which makes sense because they're both directed by the same guy. Saw 3 is incredibly bold for killing off the main antagonist, and Saw 4 is even more impressive for having a story that makes no sense, and that honestly applies to the later Saw movies as well. But I will say that Saw 6 and 7 are refreshing for actually being entertaining, and Jigsaw is also a film that exists. But the point I'm trying to make is that Saw is like McDonald's in that it's shit, but you keep coming back for more. I think the reason why people connect to these movies are because of the creative and over-the-top traps, as well as convoluted twists that contradict events in the timeline, and even contradict events that happen in the same movie that they are in, as well as Tobin Bell's performance as the series antagonist, Jigsaw, or Kramer, whatever name you want to use for him. So naturally, Spiral decides to remove all of these things so that we can have Chris Rock come in.
So now you got new, but you got a bad new. You got bad fucking new, man.
So the story behind this film is that apparently Chris Rock just sat next to a Lionsgate exec at a wedding and started pitching him his visionary take on the Saw franchise, which eventually led to him meeting with the studio head, and I believe the reason he did this was so that he could prove himself as a real actor. And if that's the case, then he failed miserably because he's by far the worst actor in this whole film.
Do I look like a fucking Jamaican nanny? Do I smell like jerk sauce and baby wipes? No, me no want no partner.
Every time he talks, I feel like I'm watching his stand-up comedy special on Netflix, as opposed to his character. And even in the other Saw films, the actors were pretty decent, for the most part. And this includes, like, minor roles, and even the lead singer from Linkin Park. But the fact that most of the actors in the Saw films are unknown people also helps the believability, so that you're not distracted by a famous face that seems out of place, like if popular comedian Chris Rock just suddenly showed up as the main character of a Saw film. That would just be weird. But even with a recognisable face, like the lead singer from Linkin Park, I can at least buy them in their roles. And I think Danny Glover is a good example because he is a famous actor who's been in Lethal Weapon, but I can at least buy that he looks like a seasoned cop. Whereas Chris Rock, I mean, seriously? It just feels like Lionsgate are just shooting themselves in the foot for no good reason. And his clearly improvised dialogue is awful and is only there to add cheap comedic relief in a movie that does not need this kind of levity.
I don't know, I like the Saw movies, and I thought, what the Saw need? Humor. I've been staring at this shit for 5 hours. I don't even look at porn that long. Don't drain my battery watching Twilight. I saw you out front the other day. You nodded at me like we're the only 2 black guys in the mall.
My wife and I are doing this counseling. She's got me working on like communication.
Counseling? Hey, that's nice. Yeah, my wife fucked the counselor.
Now look at 7. This movie is bleak and depressing, but there are some moments of levity that are effective in developing the relationships between the characters, but it also doesn't just take away from the overall dark tone of that film, whereas in Spiral, Chris Rock just starts randomly shouting out Twilight references and Forrest Gump, and then proceeds to talk about cheating on his wife or some dumb shit like that for 2 hours, like he does in his stand-up comic specials. It also doesn't help that he cannot emote for shit, as there are like 10 shots of him looking at the camera with a very serious face like, wow, what emotion is this meant to be given off? Because it's the same thing for like a bunch of different things. Like in this one shot, I think we're meant to be interpreting that he's really torn up about his partner's death, or maybe he's like angry, or I just don't know, it just seems like his resting face to me. There's literally no difference between this reaction and these other reactions throughout the whole movie. But enough about that, let's talk about the stuff that people actually care about, like the traps. Are they any good? No. Not only are they incredibly boring compared to the crazy stuff that we get in the previous Saw films, like in Saw 6, where 2 people were competing to see who can cut more flesh. I mean, that's pretty gross. And Saw 7, when their trap is made public, where a woman is literally being broken up by her 2 boyfriends. However, in Spiral, you get someone being hit by a train, and some shooting glass, and I don't even remember the other ones. That is pretty boring and lackluster compared to what we've had before in the same franchise. So not only are the traps less creative, but there's also no tension because nobody ever survives these traps, so at a certain point, you just know that all these people are going to die no matter what, which means you're not invested in the scene. And the point of a Saw trap is that you can escape. so the audience could be on the edge of their seat wondering, oh, is this person going to make it? Like, for example, Saw 6 had this spinning carousel trap where you actually do feel empathy for the people about to be shot because they all start spouting their life story in order to not die, to convince the guy to not press the button on them specifically. It was kind of engaging because there was a chance that, some of these people would escape while others would not be so lucky and die. But no, in Spiral, they just all die. It's not very engaging. The reason for these traps existing is also really weak. Because see, with Jigsaw, he had a motive for setting up traps because he wants to rehabilitate his victims by teaching them life lessons like don't smoke or don't grieve incorrectly, which, it makes no sense. But whatever, it's an excuse for there being traps that are theoretically escapable. And Spiral tries to do a similar thing where this guy's motive is that he wants to kill corrupt police, but also give them a chance to be rehabilitated like Jigsaw. But it makes even less sense with the context of it being focused on police rather than normal people, because how the hell is a cop without hands or a tongue going to be a good cop? You might as well just kill them because these life lessons are not going to lead them into being better cops if they can't even hold a gun. And that's where the plot and social commentary starts falling apart, because why even set up traps to imitate Jigsaw? It would just make more logical sense to just kill them outright rather than being elaborate for no reason, and probably costing a lot of money to do this as well. And I'll tell you why, because this is a Saw movie. That's why the camera spins around the victims with the choppy editing. It's in the title, so there has to be traps. And that's also why Chris Rock is randomly handcuffed for no reason, because it's a reference to Saw 1's initial trap with the characters being chained up. To be honest, this would be a better movie if it wasn't forced to be a Saw movie, because the twist that the new Jigsaw killer is this generic guy is also lame. Like, the way it's presented is just so lazy. There's no over-the-top music like in Saw 1, he's just standing there in the middle of the room. And no offense to this actor, but his voice sucks ass. He's not intimidating in the slightest, even with the voice modulator for the puppet. Whereas if you compare that to Tobin Bell, oof, that is iconic.
Hello, Amanda. You don't know me, but I know you. I want to play a game, live or die. Make your choice.
Hello, Detective Fitch. I want to play a game, live or die. Make your choice.
Most people are so ungrateful to be alive, but not you. Not anymore.
John Kramer was right. Spiral. Symbol of change, evolution, progress.
It's also really predictable that this guy's the killer because he's the only victim to not get an explicit death scene. And if you're watching a Saw movie, you're expecting twists, so who else is going to be the new Jigsaw, aside from the obvious red herring of Sam Jackson being the killer? And honestly, I would have preferred him being the new Jigsaw as opposed to replacing Tobin Bell with generic actor person who nobody's heard of. And look, if you were a seasoned cop, you'd be slightly suspicious of a random message from your son telling you to meet at an abandoned factory for no reason when you could just meet at your apartment. But going back to the victims being bad cops, I imagine that this was probably Chris Rock's genius idea to revitalise the Saw franchise with social commentary that reflects real-life political issues. Now this is just a bad idea because Saw is not the series you should try to make political statements with, and I'm not even saying I disagree with it, but like Saw 6 did the same thing with its thematic subject matter of healthcare in the United States being bad, and it just feels very forced in a Saw movie, because people are going to these movies for torture porn basically, and for all the other reasons I mentioned before. But look, if you are going to do social commentary, at least have it not be so surface level, and that's what really harms this movie. But aside from that, this movie's just very bland. The cinematography is competent, and some of the actors are serviceable at best. This is of course excluding Chris Rock. But the production value makes this whole thing look extremely cheap, as if it were an episode of some CW show. And the script is also very by the numbers, with cliche story beats like the detective not wanting a partner, as well as lackluster characters. And I could not give a flying fuck about the father-son relationship or the dynamic between these two detectives because it's just not compelling. The score is also so unremarkable you barely notice it, and the plot points that there being another Jigsaw copycat has been done to death in like 20 other Saw films before this, and for that reason I'm giving this film a 1 out of 5.